Hi guys, and welcome to this video about recording yourself making videos with your iPhone, aka great, now I've got to learn to be a filmmaker as well as doing my normal job. With so many people having to move their work online, the demand for video has never been higher. But conversely, the inability to access professionals like myself has also never been higher. So what we've got to do is learn to make videos ourselves. The good news is you can shoot professional high definition videos by yourself by just using your phone, like I'm doing right now. I'm using the iPhone 8 Plus because that's the phone I have, but honestly, if you've any phones from the last couple of years, it should do a great job. There's loads to discuss, so let's just jump on in there. Pretty much every camera nowadays has a front-facing camera and a rear-facing camera. Now, the rear-facing camera is a better quality camera, so you are going to get a better image quality with it. But the trade-off is you're not going to be able to see yourself when you're recording, so you're going to have to spend a bit more time testing your shot and preparing up front to be able to use this method. Better quality, more risks. Now, most people will opt for the front-facing camera so they can actually just see themselves while they're recording. I think that's what most people are going to do, so I'm going to focus on that for this video, but I just wanted to mention the other option in case you want to try, in case you really want to squeeze the best quality possible from your camera. If you choose to work with the rear-facing camera, I'd suggest either asking someone else to stand behind the camera just to make sure it stays recording, that you stay in focus, or maybe even set up a mirror behind it at an angle so that you can just check that everything looks more or less okay every now and then. There's nothing worse than recording for 10 minutes and then realizing you hadn't even hit record. The camera on the front is a little bit lower quality, but it should still be able to record full HD for you. And the great part is then you are going to be able to see yourself recording, you're going to see the red light on, and you're going to be able to just double check every now and then that you're still in frame. Before we start filming though, the first thing we have to do is go into our camera settings and just make sure we're recording at the best quality possible. Now, obviously, the higher the resolution, the higher quality of the video recording, the more space it's going to take. So before you get started, is a very good time to go through your phone and maybe delete those apps you're not using, remove any photos, transfer them onto computer, back them up. You're going to need space on your phone, and if you do it now, it's going to save you a lot of hassle later on than having to pause mid-shoot to clear some space and start again. To check the settings for your camera on your iPhone, all you have to do is you go into Settings, then you scroll down to Camera, tap in there. Here you're going to see a number of settings. If grid isn't turned on, I recommend you turn it on. You'll see afterwards what that does. Record video, if you just tap in there, you'll see all the options available to you. Make sure you're recording at 1080p. Okay, so you're going to hear a lot of terminology, and what we're going to try and do is use the jargon alert to explain things in as clear a way as possible. When people talk about high definition HD, usually what they're talking about is 1080p. 1080 is literally the number of pixels on the height of your image. 720 is just basically a smaller version. It's kind of like a little brother to high definition. And of course, 4K is the higher quality that people film in nowadays. Great if you can use it, but it does take up large file sizes. But as you can see, there is a lot more real estate you're working with there. Use the best you can, but honestly, if you can film in 1080 in decent light and sound settings, you're doing amazing. You may have a few choices on frame rate. Don't really worry about frame rate. Basically, FPS means frames per second. That's literally how many individual images it's recording every second. If you have, say, 25, 30 frames per second, perfect. Don't worry about it beyond that. With the settings out of the way, the last thing we really need to do is make sure you clean the lens of your camera. Wipe away any dirty smudges, greasy fingerprints, anything that can build up over time. It's going to mean your image is a lot sharper, a lot clearer. Before we move on, I want to mention that yes, it is possible to use your PC or your laptop to monitor your camera. If you're interested in doing something like this, you can look up, I think it's the Connect app on Windows, just Google it. And on the Mac, you can use the QuickTime player, allows you to do it if your camera is plugged into your computer. Also, if you've got Chromecast or Apple TV, you can mirror the image to your television. It can just be a handy way to see what's in frame, but if you don't have it, don't worry, it just can be a benefit. And last but not least, if you want that extra bit of control, if video is something that you're interested in, there are third-party apps that will allow you to have full control of your camera on your phone, like Filmic Pro. Filmic Pro costs about 16, 17 euro in the Apple Store at the moment. It's a great app. You won't get any higher quality than you'd get with a normal camera, but you'll have full control over the focus and the exposure. Exposure is just how bright your image is, how much light is actually hitting the sensor. Still with me? Great. Let's keep going. Choosing the right location will have a big effect on the quality of your video. It's a bit of a balancing act between what looks best, what sounds best, and where the best light is. Honestly, the most important thing is sound, so actually I prioritize that over the others. Then after that, I'd probably lean on where the best light is, and from there kind of work what's the nicest looking shot I can get, balancing the sound and the light. From an audio point of view, you want somewhere that's quiet enough, as quiet as possible in a world of kids, animals, TVs in other rooms, noisy fridges. Smaller rooms are going to sound less echoey. This room's a little bit echoey. If you've got carpets or rugs, that's going to help soak up some of that sound, so that's going to sound better as well. From a light point of view, the best and probably the most complementary source of light you're going to have access to is that burning ball of fire in the sky called the sun. So you're going to want to set yourself up near enough to windows. You don't want really harsh direct light because that kind of gives you strong lit and then very heavy shadows. Better to avoid that. So either you film at a time of day when the sun is maybe not quite so harsh, or at an angle so that you're not getting the direct light on yourself. Spotlights like the ones I have here at home tend to give very harsh light. You can see they create some very moody shadows, which can be great, but probably best avoided if possible. If you're stuck working with something like that, then lamps can be your friend. Anything nearby that can just bring a bit of light in, soften those shadows up. You'll know yourself looking at the screen. And if you don't have much daylight, or you got to film in the evenings and you don't have very well lit rooms, work with the brightest room you can. While you can see here in a darker room, the camera struggles to pick up enough light. And so what happens is it degrades the image trying to boost it. So you can see all this sort of noise getting in here, and the image just looks softer and not as nice. Now, we can do certain things in post-production to clean that up, but it's never going to look as good or as great. So if at all possible, try and avoid it. Now, if that's the only way you can make your videos, don't lose heart completely, because yes, your footage isn't going to look as nice, but really what makes a great video is having a good story and also just being clear and concise. If your message is good, your video can still be great. So walk around your room with your camera in your hand and just explore it. Find out. Don't ever shoot with the windows behind you. You can see what the camera does there. It automatically tries to focus for them and it makes you darker. So you want to always try and make sure that the windows are facing towards you. Apart from that, just move it around and see where you think looks good. You can be sitting down or wherever it is. Just make sure there's nothing in the background behind you that you don't want people to see or that's too jarring. Before we move on, I just want to say a little something about the kind of clothes and jewelry you wear in your video. When it comes to jewelry or watches, try to avoid anything that's going to be overly clicky or clacky. It's just distracting in the video. And when it comes to your clothes, try to avoid solid blacks or overly bright whites. And when it comes to color, color is always a great thing. If you can use color, do. When it comes to framing, the most important thing to remember is film it landscape, not portrait. If you do it in portrait mode, your video is going to look like this. Just don't do it. Don't do it. But Mark, you say, what if I want to make a video for Instagram? Still don't do it. Film it in landscape mode, and then afterwards we can crop out the sides. It just gives you more options. Please never ever film in portrait mode. From a framing point of view, try to have the camera as close to eye level as possible. This is how we like to talk to people, on our level. If at all possible, try to avoid nasal gazing. But how are you going to get your phone to eye level and to stay there safely? Well, you've got a number of options. Obviously, what we'd advocate is a small camera tripod. You'll find loads of options on Amazon or any other retailer. Of course, this is going to take a little bit of a time to get to you. So if you want to jump straight into your videos, or you don't have the time or the money to buy one of these, don't worry, let's be creative and let's come up with a couple of suggestions of how you can still do this at home and start today. From a height point of view, the easiest way to get it up to your eye level is probably using a pile of books or DVDs or Blu-rays Anything flat that you can safely stack up against each other. Obviously, you don't want to put your phone at risk. For keeping your camera in place, I know some people have covers of their phones that they can fold that will keep the phone in an upright position. Usually, this will leave it at a bit of an angle that I'm not a huge fan of, but you can use those if you want. You can try pinning your camera, your phone, between some books or something like that. I see a lot of people doing that and it does work, but it's a little bit risky, and the last thing I'd want is for one of your phones to fall and smash on the floor, or smash and get even more cracked than it may already be. I know some people have very smartly used blue tack as a way to actually stick their phone to a surface or to build a little barrier in front of it, and that's a really good idea. But what I'm going to suggest to you, which is my favorite hack for making your own home tripod, is, bear with me. Thanks for waiting. Paper cups. Just one of these. And don't believe me? Well, it's what's been holding my phone the whole way through this video. So with just a little bit of handicrafts and scissors work, you can just cut out a little area on this, and then what you can do is just place your phone directly into it and you have a mobile tripod. It's amazing, not only because it's quite stable, but actually, unlike with books or with blue tack, what you'll find is it makes it super easy to be able to angle and adjust it. I can just pick it up, I can put it down, I can pick it up, I can pop it somewhere else. So if you're moving around the room or if you're trying to do things in different places, this is the quickest and easiest way, and it's completely stable. So really, like, it's a no-brainer. I use it all the time. You are welcome. So when you're picking your shot and you've decided your background that looks nice, try to make sure you're maybe 2 to 3 feet from the camera. That's good enough distance that you don't look like you're too much in on top of it, but also it's still close enough that the microphone should pick you up well and you're going to sound good, you're going to sound clear. Just a quick little reset. So this camera is now recording this screen, just in case you're wondering why the camera is now here in shot. So remember the grid and the camera settings I told you to turn on earlier on? Well, hopefully you can see that now, but that's these lines here. See them there? So basically, these just serve as a way to help you frame yourself up. Now, it's really personal choice on this. Some people like to be dead center straight on, which I'm actually quite a fan of, because I feel you're talking directly to someone. But for a more cinematic idea, some people like to use the rule of thirds. You don't really need to understand what that is. Basically, when you see these lines on your screen, see wherever these lines join. If you line yourself up with one of those, so like here, you'll see it's a bit more of a cinematic framing. It can be a nice one, definitely for interviews and everything you do it, but experiment, don't be afraid to use it. Everyone who knows me knows I can't really make a video without mentioning or touching upon story. And there's a reason for that. It's what's going to make your video stand out. It's what's going to make it great. It's the one thing that most people forget about. And if you take the time to work on it, your material is going to shine above everyone else's. I'll probably discuss this in more detail in another video, but if you can't wait till then, you just need to get going. Here are the basics. Please plan your story. Work out a clear outline or script in advance. You don't have to follow it word for word in your video, but literally just forming it out is going to form a structure in your brain, and it's going to make you seem much more coherent. It's going to make your message more focused. Please don't write a script that reads like an academic article. That's absolutely fine if it's something you're going to post online for people to read, but this isn't. This is a video. People are going to watch and listen to it. So instead of writing a read, you need to be writing a talk. You need to write how you would speak to someone, how you'd actually engage with someone if they were there right in front of you. Don't try to be perfect, be yourself. Last but not least, you have to practice. Yes, it takes some time, but there's no shortcut here. The more familiar you are, the more comfortable you are with your material, the better your video is going to be, the better your presentation is going to be. It's that simple. So first things first, when you start recording, you want to make sure that you're lit well enough, it's bright enough, you're exposed correctly. You can manually adjust this on an iPhone by just tapping on your face or wherever you want to expose the image. And that will bring up this little sunshine that you can just click and you can drag up or down to brighten or darken the image. And that will set it for you. The iPhone automatically does these things, it does a pretty good job. Again, I mentioned Filmic Pro if you want an app, which is what I use, which can just make it a bit easier to lock those in and make sure they don't change. The next thing you want to do is check for your audio. So you're going to have a listen out for any noises that you can hear. Make sure you close all your windows, computers are turned off, anything that's making noise. I know the temptation here is just to jump in and try and get through it all. Don't do it. Record yourself speaking for 10 or 15 seconds, stop, play it back, watch it, see where you are in frame, listen to how it sounds, make sure that you're happy with this before you progress and actually go through your full video. This will save you so much stress later on. I'm going to ask you to do another thing that may seem a little bit strange, but what I'd like you to do is also record about a 5 or 10 second clip of silence in the room, in the exact same position you're going to record your video in. What that does is that gives us professional editors a sample of the background noise in your room. And what we can do with that afterwards is we can highlight that sound and we can remove it from the rest of your video. So basically, if there's just any hums or buzzes in the background, it makes it much easier and quicker for us to remove it while still keeping a good quality sound of your voice. So where should you look? Straight down the lens, straight down the center of this lens here. The reason being, it means you're talking directly to the person. Now watch, if I'm watching myself on the screen there, how I'm not actually talking directly to you anymore. I'm looking at myself. So it's handy from a point of view of being able to check that the image is what I want, but I've lost the connection with you. But when I turned back, all of a sudden, we're directly connected. It's much more engaging. It does take some getting used to, but you will get used to it. Now, if you need to reference your outline or your script mid-video, I say go ahead and do it. What you don't do is you don't kind of glance down and try and figure out where you are, because people aren't going to understand what's happening. Instead, do the exact same thing you would do in a lecture, where you just say, just let me check my notes for a second and make sure I've covered everything I want to go through. Have a look through where you are. And then when you've found where you want to be, just place your notes back down and carry on. People will understand, and in fact, the fact that you've addressed it will make it far less jarring. Now, you can edit these things out afterwards if you want, but honestly, I would say you probably don't need to, unless you find that you're doing it very, very often and you're afraid that it doesn't look well on camera. No big sighs at the beginning. There's nothing worse than when someone starts a video with, hello and welcome to this video. Immediately we feel you don't want to be there. And even if you don't want to be there, don't do it. Do your audience a favor. Now the hard part. Relax and try to sound like a human. Don't put on your primary school voice. It can be tempting, but no one responds well to that. A video is really usually watched by one person, so your relationship with your audience isn't projecting out to a room of 30 or 100 people. You're speaking directly to one person. So use the tone and energy you would when talking directly to one person. Try and keep it conversational as much as possible. And lastly, it's unlikely you're going to remember your script fully through and be able to do your video in one take. Now, if you can, that's amazing. You're a better human being than me. But if you can't, there are two approaches that can work for this. You can either take the approach like I've done in this video, where you'll see that the camera just cuts between pieces. That's called a jump cut. Now, 10 years ago, that would have been seen as a little bit unprofessional, but it's actually become the standard approach for online materials, particularly in the era of YouTube. So it's just fine to use. So what I do there is I'll learn basically a paragraph or 3 or 4 lines worth of my script. I'll speak directly to you, and then what I'll do is I'll hold for a second. I'll pick up my script, I'll have a read, find where I am, what's the next piece, put it down, calm, and jump back into the next point. With my script, I'll speak directly to you and jump back into the next point. So for this method to work, you're going to have to be a little bit more animated, especially with your hands. The reason is when you come in with a new point, you'll see that the jump edit is actually smoothed by the motion. Basically, it distracts our eye a little bit and it makes the edit a little less jarring. However, if you stay completely still and you're talking to someone and then you check your notes, and then you come up and you start talking again, then you'll see how the lack of movement, it really draws your eye to the change, to that edit. So it's much more jarring. So if you want to do it, I'd say relax, be a bit more expressive. Another approach is different locations for different paragraphs. If you change your location and shot after each paragraph, they should edit together pretty smoothly. The reason being that our brain sees that there's been a change in the background, so it accepts a change has happened and it refreshes itself. Now, this kind of approach works best if you can change the side of frame you are on in each interconnecting shot. Both approaches work great. It's really down to personal choice and also the space available to you and what works best for you. Okay, so you finished your masterpiece. So what's next? Well, either you can edit and upload the video yourself, or you can send it to someone like me to have it polished and finished off. First things first, don't edit out your mistakes. Let us do that. I know it can feel embarrassing, but trust us, we've seen this 1,000 times before. It's better for us to have all the footage so that we can actually make the edit where we think it's best. If you cut it for us in advance, there's nothing we can do. The same goes for any kind of color or audio effects. Add nothing to the raw footage. If you're going to need edits made to your video, what you want to do is provide your editor with a very clear cut list. Now, this is something you can just create in Excel, very simple document. All you have to do to make sure they have the information they need is that they have an in point, which is basically just the actual start time, like is it 5 seconds into the footage or not. Include the first couple of words, that's the beginning of that sentence. And then an out point, basically when you want the clip to end, and include the last couple of words that should be in that sentence. It's really important to include those words because sometimes the seconds you write down may not be quite as exact, and it allows the editor to feel confident that they've got the piece you want. This avoids them having to come forward and back to you over and over again just to be sure. Basically, it speeds up the process. And lastly, sending it to us. Now, if you have access to something called Microsoft 365, you can use OneDrive. OneDrive is basically a file storage thing that Microsoft has, but you can download the app straight onto your phone and it will allow you to access your photos and videos, and you can upload directly from there, and then you can share them on to whoever you want. If you don't have OneDrive or you don't want to use it, you can use other options like going into the browser and going to WeTransfer.com. They'll walk you through a way to be able to upload and send your videos to anyone you want to. Or of course, you can connect your camera to your computer, download the videos off there, and send them from your computer to whoever you want. Obviously, depending on the length and the size of your videos, uploads can take a little bit longer. So just make sure you leave yourself enough time. Be patient and make sure that your file is fully uploaded before you close down any applications. Okay, I'm done. I know that's a lot of information to take in one particular chunk, but if you can do this a couple of times, it's going to start to become second nature for you. And then you're going to be going on and creating professional, high quality and engaging videos all the time. Thanks, guys.